My name is Pam Hart. I am the Executive Director and the Assistant Dean at the Center for Animal Law Studies. And I'm thrilled to be moderating this panel this morning called The Future of Animal Law, Education and Youth Advocacy. And as you all know, the fields of animal law, education, and youth advocacy have exploded. And what began with less than a handful of animal law courses in 1992 has grown to over 160 ABA accredited law schools across our country. And while this field is still absolutely growing in comparison to other fields, we are now finally on the map. And that's really rewarding for us all to see, some of us who have been doing this a long time. So today we're going to discuss, where do we go from here? We're going to discuss innovative approaches to advancing the future of animal law education on a global scale across a variety of disciplines, as well as through the youth advocacy movements. So with that, I am going to turn it over to our panelists, and I've asked them each to introduce themselves, tell us a little bit about what they do today, how they got here, and why this panel is important to them. And then we're going to open it up for questions, roundtable style, and then the last 15 minutes will be Q&A if you have any questions of your own. And with that, I would like to turn it over to Raj Reddy. Why don't you tell us a little bit about yourself?
Hi, thanks so much. My name is Raj Reddy. I'm the director of the Animal Law Program at the Center for Animal Law Studies at Lewis and Clark. I came into this field somewhat a unique path, just like a lot of you whom I've spoken with this weekend. I actually came to it from a background in literature, specifically post-colonial literature and discourse. And I was doing my doctorate in post-colonial studies and literature, and I was taking a human rights and literature seminar. And for those of you who might be familiar with this particular sort of area of study, there were often these stories of, the colonizer going out to distant lands and, commodifying and exploiting the surrounding communities by, comparing them to non-human animals, using terms like, savage, beast, barbarian, and so on as a means to sort of disenfranchise them. And one of the things that I would observe in these texts was, the colonized other really trying to assert their own humanity, whether that was by mimicking some of the culture or the traditions or the language of the colonizer, or by asserting their own inherent sort of humanness. And one of the things that would keep happening over the course of these narratives is that they would distance themselves from non-human animals. We are not like them. And in a way, just further entrenching sort of the commodity status of non-human animals. And so I would ask this question in these classes, what about the non-human animals? What about, their interests, their sort of rights? And, whether it was, my professors, my peers, my colleagues, the answer was, what about them? This narrative is not for them. And they were oftentimes still the objects and not the subjects of these narratives. And that really disconcerted me. And I remember having this crisis of conscience and wanting to sort of find an area that would sort of satisfy me, that would sort of answer this particular sort of ethical question that I was having. And, while I sort of directed my doctoral studies to addressing this particular issue, I wanted to find a home, a place like this. And so I searched everywhere, and I found Lewis and Clark and the Center for Animal Law Studies. And what I wanted to do there sort of morally in my, English doctoral work, I found that I could do here, actually doing some of that same stuff, transforming non-human animals from actual objects in the law to something like subjects in the law. And so that's sort of my path, my trajectory. And so at Lewis and Clark now, I teach international animal law, animal legal philosophy, and really sort of discussing with our students on a weekly basis issues like these. And so why this particular panel is important is that, really emphasizing that we all have sort of our unique trajectory. We're all coming here for very similar reasons, but also these unique pathways. and that in a robust animal law education should be able to, respond to and really give voice to all of these particular pathways. So.
Thank you, Raj. Kathy, would you like to share next?
Sure, thank you. I'm delighted to be here and lovely to see all of you. Like Raj, I think some people have relatively similar paths in, and some of us have different paths in to this work. And so I was studying and began teaching in the area of nonviolence some 35 years ago. And in doing that, I was exploring I was adopting a nonviolence philosophy to try intentionally to change my complicity with violence in the world and change who I was and how I interacted with the world. And so in doing that, we were looking, of course, at like racism and sexism and homophobia, and we got to speciesism. And so I, at that point, needed to reflect about my engagement. I was already vegetarian, but I had been vegetarian for other reasons, animal reasons, health reasons, but I hadn't seen it as a part of my sort of larger personal philosophy. And so I thought, okay, so I have to explore this. And so the more I found out about what was going on with animals in the world, the more I had to say, okay, I don't want to be a part of that. I don't want to be a part of that. And so in order to try to develop a consistent personal nonviolence philosophy, I became vegan. And so it was a long time ago, and we didn't even have the word vegan then. We were called strict vegetarians, which my mother thought made me a martyr. She was not happy about. And so that's how I got into this work. And because I came to it also through learning and teaching has always been important to me. It's been a part of how I've engaged with the world. I was an attorney at the time, and sort of in the way that Raj was indicating, it's hard to bring these new concepts to an already established setting, right, and culture. The legal services, great people, public interest lawyers, open and progressive, but this was not a conversation that they were really comfortable having or knew how to have. Same thing in my sort of protest movement communities, right? So we were protesting the war, and we were protesting I'm very old, so it was the first Iraq war, protesting all kinds of things. And those communities too had a really deep challenge having these conversations. To some degree, they're like, I think, overwhelmed, like, we're already doing so much, like, don't give us another thing we have to do. But also they truly didn't understand the value of these conversations. And obviously all of us have a little defensiveness about our own personal, it's going to make us change our own lives, and that's a big ask for people, right? And so when you're asking them to do that on top of other things, it's rough. And so that's sort of how I came to these conversations. And so I've been working and sort of trying to weave this into, right, my public interest lawyering work. And then I was able to become, speaking and writing and doing those kinds of things, and until I actually also came to Lewis and Clark and was able to do it full time. So right now I'm the assistant dean for animal legal education at GW, and we'll be building a program focusing on animal legal education, and I can talk about that more later. And I work with some folks who are here in the room. So Randy Abate on the environmental side and Lori Marino on the animal law and science side. And so I've been doing this work for a long time. I helped at Lewis and Clark. I was directing the animal law clinic for 14 years and co-founded and created the Aquatic Animal Law Initiative, and with Amy Wilson, who's in the room, co-founded the Aquatic Animal Day. So it's been really nice to be a part of developing, looking at, well, what other conversations aren't happening and how can I help foster some of those conversations? And to do it in a space that I recognize is hugely privileged, right? So we're having a conversation about animal law. The law is a very inaccessible, right? A very old system that needs an awful lot of work. And so I'm privileged to be able to teach in a law school, and I take that privilege really seriously. And part of that, for me, means using that privilege to have these kinds of conversations, to work with people like you to make things better for animals, for people, for the planet. So that's partly why I think this is important. So I've written a few things down so I didn't go on too long. I think I love teaching, and so partly that's why I do the teaching. But I think it's really important because as a legal services attorney, I could handle just so many cases. But as a teacher, I can teach students how to handle those cases, and I amplify the work. And I learn from them. I have a perspective. My perspective, I hope to continue to grow and open all the time, but I learn from my students, and bringing more voices, critique, perspective, more cultures, right, into the conversation is what we should be doing. It shouldn't just be, right, the people who are already up here or the people who have been doing this work. We need those new voices and perspectives, and teaching is a fabulous way, right, to invite people in and to give them the support so that they can do this work as well. So we can diversify, right, and develop this collective, which I think this conference is a great example of. So I think I'll stop there because I don't want to go on, and I can talk more later.
Thank you, Kathy. Claire?
Thank you.
Hi, everybody. I'm so happy to be here. I'm Claire Howe. I'm a co-founder and the executive director of a nonprofit called the Ravencor. So we are a consumer anti-oppression vegan youth activist organization.
I think your mic.
Oh, my mic's not. This is off to a good start.
There's a,
At the top.
Oh, thanks, guys.
There's a switch.
yep.
It's a little one at the top. It's one.
There we go. Got it. Okay, can you hear me now? Yay. Okay, from the top.
Take two.
Okay, so hi, I'm Claire Howe. I'm a co-founder and the executive director of a nonprofit called the Ravencor. We're a consistent anti-oppression youth activist organization for young advocates between the ages of 15 to 22, otherwise known as Ravens. A little bit of background on me. So I got my start in animal advocacy. Like so many people, I watched a video. I don't want to go on for too long, but maybe it's an interesting story. I was living in Phoenix, Arizona, and a friend and I went to lunch one day. We went to Subway, and I was just standing there looking at the meat behind the counter, and it just dawned on me that I had absolutely no clue where it was coming from. So I went home that night and I Googled it, and a PETA video came up, and I watched it, and I was just completely horrified and disgusted and cried myself to sleep that night. And that was the beginning of my journey in animal rights activism. And so after a couple of years of grassroots advocacy, I decided to go to law school specifically to work on behalf of animals. And I thought I wanted to be a lobbyist, but over the course of law school, I realized that wasn't really something I was interested in doing. And I also wasn't interested in being a practitioner. So I needed to buy some time, and I wanted to study the thing I actually wanted to study. So I was lucky enough to be invited to be part of the inaugural LLM class here in animal law, and graduated in 2013. And one of the things that I started doing throughout the course of my legal education was volunteering for a nonprofit called HEART. They're a human education organization based out of New York City, and they do phenomenal work. And so I became their Portland program manager. And one of the things, I had a lot of creative control and autonomy in that job. And one of the things that I created was a program for young vegan activists. I started facilitating animal rights clubs in local high schools. So I met a really great group of young people. And I think it was an important moment for me too, in that like I don't think I've ever stopped being 16. So I kind of found my calling by working with these young people. And we went to the Animal Rights Conference in Los Angeles in 2016, and there was nothing for young people. There was nothing for their demographic, and they were really disheartened by that. So we agreed that when we got back to Portland, we would start something. And that was the dawn of what would ultimately become the Ravencor. And as time went on over the years, we had more and more Ravens who would say, you know, I really appreciate that we're advocating on behalf of animals, but I would like to be doing more work in social justice. I'd like to be advocating on behalf of the environment more. And so we rebranded, and we became more radicalized too, which was, I think for me, a really positive thing too. My advocacy became a lot more, we use the term multidimensional. It's a term that's been coined by AFCO, if anybody's familiar with her work. So a little bit about what we do now. We are a intergenerationally led youth activist organization. We try to be very authentic in that, because I think that something that young activists need is a lot of autonomy and creative control, but also a lot of support. So this last year, we launched Operation Mind Over Milk. Essentially, we're working to increase access to plant-based milk options in US schools that rely upon the National School Lunch Program. I mean, I can go into this a little bit more later on. Again, don't want to take too much time up now, but the National School Lunch Program, while a fabulous program, it feeds millions and millions of hungry children. It has a glaringly obvious flaw in that dairy milk is the only beverage option available to students. So this is a problem for all sorts of reasons. I mean, namely, it's just blatant dietary racism. 70% of the young people who rely upon the National School Lunch Program are people of color. 65% of them can't digest lactose. So we're literally forcing a product upon young people that they can't properly digest, and then expecting them to go back to class and learn. I think we all know the animal cruelty issues associated with the dairy industry. And then of course, it's also a huge environmental problem. Climate change, water depletion, soil degradation, you name it. So that's what we've been working on this year. And I would say that this panel is important because again, just through my own personal experience, I have become such a better activist by way of listening to and working with young people. I think it is crucial that we listen to them, that we involve them, that we give them a platform. So I'm excited to be here.
Thank you so much. And with that, we'll jump into some questions about the future of animal law education. And I'd like to start with Kathy and Raj here. So why is it important to have animal law courses, initiatives, and programs at law schools? And then Claire, I'm going to follow up with you that same question. What kind of programs, initiatives are out there for young people, but also how does Gen Z influence a lot of what we're doing? What's the cycle here and how can we benefit and learn from that? Raj or Kathy, would you like to start?
Yeah, I can take a step back to answer that question more fully. I mean, I think it really starts with students, and students really started, at Lewis and Clark, students reached out to Joyce Tischler, the mother of animal law, when she was at ALDF, and they started the first Student Animal Legal Defense Fund chapter, and our students started the following year, the Animal Law Review, the first journal dedicated exclusively to addressing sort of animal law legal issues. And it was really sort of that groundswell, in addition to and being informed by, you know, the limited number of courses that we were able to offer at Lewis and Clark, that started, you know, the Center for Animal Law Studies, this collaboration between the Animal Legal Defense Fund and Lewis and Clark Law School. And as I mentioned, you know, earlier, students like me, you know, advocates like me, we were looking for a home. And one of the things that a dedicated sort of animal law program signals to those folks who probably, you know, very much like yourselves, if you're anything like me, were facing sort of this crisis moment of, I really need to do this work. Where can I do this work? Where can I be effective? And an animal law program indicates to those advocates, to those folks who are interested in entering into sort of the passion work of their life, that, you know, you'll have the courses here to sustain you. You'll have sort of the community here to sort of inspire you. And all of these things are, again, sort of indicated, flagged by the existence of animal law programs. And one of the things that I oversee as the director of our global ambassador program is, you know, the issuance of, you know, funding for several of our graduates who are looking to replicate what we've done at the Center for Animal Law Studies in other countries. And so right now we've had students who are developing some of the first animal law courses, or who just taught the first animal law courses in, you know, Pakistan, Zimbabwe, South Africa, and elsewhere. And it's really, again, allowing, you know, students to be the next educators, to take what they've learned from the existence of animal law programs, whether that's at GW or at Lewis and Clark, or, you know, Vermont Law School, Harvard Law School, and the like, and make this normal, that animal law programs should exist everywhere. And that's just one of the beautiful things about, you know, the very first of these animal law programs, is that they can have this ripple effect.
Thank you, Raj. Kathy, would you like to add to that?
Yeah, thank you. I think thinking about it in a sort of a structural sense and in a substantive sense. So building on what Raj has said, structurally, it's important that they exist for a lot of reasons. It's a measurement sort of how far we've come, and a springboard for how far we'll get to go. But when you think about the status of law schools, and it's important to know what they speak about and what they're silent about, because those are value statements, right? And so when they're not talking about certain things, it means they don't think it's important. And those value statements are heard by judges, legislators, journalists, doctors, veterinarians, right? The community understands when the people who are in charge of legal education say something's important. It has this huge ripple effect, even beyond our students, even beyond our clients. And so it's really important to have this statement that this is worthy of being in these institutions. And once they're there, then students who might not have even thought about this can come to it. They see it's a possible education path. They see it's a possible career path that opens up so many more doors. But it also opens up conversations among faculty, among legislators and judges who begin to take it seriously. It creates space for scholarship to be developed. And again, judges and legislators to rely on that for really deep and innovative thinking to happen, our students write the most amazing papers, right? They have time to think about things and to bring issues forward. Our students have written bills, right? Whether in clinics or just from seminar papers, the work they've done has really mattered. And so structurally, it's an important statement to say that this belongs in a law school. It's really important that it has the same space that all these other programs have, that environmental programs or women in the law programs, gender in the law programs, all these things are really important. And so it's an important statement. But substantively, we need the work to be happening. We need the innovative thinking, we need the writing, we need speaking, and we need to be able to platform our students, right? To give them a springboard to help their careers, a space where they can begin to do this work in a supportive way. And again, as Raj said, not just collegially within a school, but among schools. And so that's part of the work of the new program at GW, right? Is to support programs everywhere. So I've been able to help with some of the development, but I want to help sort of all the programs, help programs say that this is, you know, what Cal's is really good at, and this is what Vermont's going to be really good at. That's great, but let's also work together where we can collaboratively so that our students' network is really large, right? And so that these resources can be spread really broadly.
Thank you. Claire, would you like to add what type of programs are out there, if any, that give younger people exposure to, excuse me, legal education?
Yeah, I mean, I will say what currently exists is great, but there's not enough of it. I mean, the first one that comes to mind is the Classroom Law Project. I think that it's a phenomenal program, and it really gives young people, high school students, a really good understanding of the basic legal framework, as well as how our government works. And you know, there are some programs. Factory Farming Awareness Coalition has a really great student program that essentially educates young people on how to become activists. Farm Sanctuary has a great program as well, certainly the Raven Corps. But again, I think that these kinds of programs are severely lacking. So I would love to see more of those types of programs and courses spring up. Can I move into why Gen Z?
Sure.
Yeah, I think, and you know, I'm always hesitant to speak on behalf of an entire generation, but so I can really only speak to like my experience working with the Ravens. But I think the way in which they're shaping the modern day animal rights movement is they see this as very much a political issue. I mean, we define veganism as a consistent anti-oppression political stance and lifestyle. And I think that that's really important, because what we're trying to get at here is that we can't end exploitation of human beings, non-human animals, or the environment if we're not really addressing the root causes of oppression, namely white supremacy, patriarchy, capitalism. So I think that Gen Z is definitely moving in this direction of understanding we can put band-aids on the symptoms of these problems, but unless we're really addressing them at their roots, we're not going to get very far. So I think that's a really, again, that's an incredibly important kind of turn of events for this generation. And I think it's also, you know, just maybe a little bit more specifically, I mean, the advent of social media really has changed the movement. They operate quite differently, and they distribute information differently. And, you know, I have a love-hate relationship with social media, but I think on the positive side, it's a phenomenal tool for advocacy that they really have become savvy at using.
Thank you so much, Claire. So let's move to challenges here. And there's so much to cover in so little time. So we're going to talk about some challenges and then some opportunities, and then we'll open it up for Q&A. So what unique challenges do animal advocates of the future face, and how does a robust animal law education equip them to be effective advocates? Go ahead. Let's open it up to all.
So the advocates are facing incredible challenges right now, right? So we look at the climate crisis and we see that 1/3 of animals and plants on the planet are at risk of extinction. We are facing a time in which the problems are evolving so much faster than our ability to identify, much less than address them. And there's also a significant problem right now with lack of faith in our institutions. And that's the institutions of law, of government, of science, right? Those are foundational structures. So when we had, in the past, we've had some critique of those institutions, and that still, of course, needs to happen. But right now, we have such an erosion of faith, and we don't have anything to replace them with. So I'm happy to critique those institutions, but we need some structures to rely upon. And so working forward with trying to solve these problems while we don't have sort of a firm ground to stand on and the ground seems like it's getting shakier, right? That's something that advocates are facing at a really exponential level that is, I think, newer for this generation of problem solvers. And so facing these sort of grim futures is really challenging. But I think building on what Claire said, we have an amazingly talented group of people who are working across all generations with new technologies, with new tools, right? Coming up with new solutions. And so it makes me hopeful, but we have to be working a little bit better collaboratively. And we also have, I think, a challenge in working together in this moment in time when our ideologies or our strategies aren't completely aligned. We have this problem where people are like, I'm not going to work with you, right? Because you don't understand my issues or where I'm coming from, what have you, or I'm not completely aligned with your strategies. There's really important conversations to be had in that space. Really, really important voices need to be heard. And we need to figure out how to maneuver through that, right? And it's fine to say, these folks I'm not going to work with, but we have to figure out what alliances do work, right? We have to not sort of shame all the people we're trying to convince to change their minds and their behaviors. We need to not demonize the people who, for all kinds of reasons, are engaged in behaviors we want to change. And we have to figure out better how to work together.
Thank you, Kathy. Roger, would you like to add anything?
Sure. I mean, to echo something that Kathy said, I mean, this next generation is facing, historic challenges, the climate crisis, the increased threat of pandemics, antimicrobial resistance. I mean, it's no longer the case that if you want to be working in animal law, that you can sort of focus just on animal laws, because the threats that you are facing just in terms of, existentially are so broad and so numerous. And so certainly, through the One Health paradigm, which offers us an opportunity to think about how the health of the public is inextricably intertwined with the health of the environment and the health of animals. But, increasingly these students and these future advocates are going to have to struggle with the problems that, the current generation and past generations have caused. And it's up to us in our sort of education in our classrooms to, front and center that. What does the current generation, folks who are in our positions, what do we owe to these advocates of the future? How best do we equip them? What courses do they need to take? What frameworks do they really need to understand to advocate for, particularly those at the margins? And so not just, non-human animals, but also disenfranchised groups. One of the things that I sort of moonlight as, at least before the pandemic, I was a writer in the schools here at the Portland public school system. And I would go and teach, creative writing to these students at Madison High School. And it's probably the most diverse high school here in Portland. And one of the things that these students were, conveying to me is that, the canon, the literature, it doesn't represent us. We need to see ourselves reflected in the curriculum, in the classroom, and we need to be sort of front and centered so that we are seen as, folks whose voices count and folks whose perspectives are going to be integrated into solutions. And so I think that's something that, animal law education has to take really seriously. And I'm thinking about that in the formal sense of education in the classroom, but also animal law education in the sense of, when I go to work at an organization, that organization needs to consider my perspective, and not just in the sense of increasing diversity, but also what do I have to add? What does my perspective have to add to the solutions to these, these systemic problems? And I think, Claire spoke to that really well.
Thanks. Thank you, Raj. Would you like to add to that
Yeah, I
challenging
think
question?
Raj and Kathy just did a phenomenal job. I think the one thing that I would add is just that, this generation is struggling terribly with their mental health and lack of hope. And understandably, you look at what they're living through and it's pretty rough. So I think that there's a lot that we can be doing to support them. And I think that there needs to be a real shift in our culture, and that we understand that self-care is not about taking a bath. It's not about, relaxing with a cup of tea in front of a fire. It's much more than that. Our work culture is fundamentally flawed. And so I think there needs to be a lot more consideration given to how do we shift our culture so that we really are respecting rest, we're really respecting ourselves. And we're better understanding that like this kind of hustle culture, this kind of grind culture is not conducive to mental health. It's not sustainable. And it's certainly not sustainable for this generation when they are up against things like apocalyptic climate change, among so many other issues, right? So I think that that's something that we need to be paying very, very careful, close attention to, and we need to be exercising a tremendous amount of compassion for the fact that young people have really been dealt a pretty, I would love to use profanity, but I won't say, have really been dealt a pretty brutal hand.
Thank you, Claire. When we opened up the panel this morning, we talked about the strong foothold that we have in the US here, over 160 student chapters, multiple classes. When we look to expand animal law abroad, what do you see as some of the hurdles to expanding it in a way that we have here in the US? Raj, would you like to start?
Sure. I think a lot of the same problems that we experienced here, 20, 25 years ago. What is animal law? And you want to teach it at my law school? And it's understandable, because there's not a lot of literature written about it. There are not a lot of cases to inform what animal law is. And I think, again, one of the things that we do at the Center for Animal Law Studies is, we welcome, animal advocates from all over, China, Kazakhstan, Australia, Chile, Peru, New Zealand, France, Ireland, the list really just Spain, it just goes on and on, South Africa. And one of the things that they do here is they learn how animal law can be taught and what sort of constitutes animal law over the course of the 10 or 15 or 20 animal law courses that they can take during their residency. And they take that knowledge back home and again are sort of creating animal law centers and creating some of the very first animal law courses. And it's, again, so difficult to convince an institution that animal law has a home here or animal law can have a home here, that there are potential sort of jobs available to our candidates once they graduate. And it's something that, CALS has been working with our graduates to try to institute that, to give them the literature, to give them sort of the knowledge that they take back home in order to create these courses and have that same sort of ripple effect that we all are trying to have here just within the US still. And so to the extent that it is possible, further empowering these advocates, further supporting them, whether that's financially or following them on social media and supporting their efforts, because, with the crises that we've all been talking about, these are not US crises, these are international crises, and the solutions have to be unique to the capacities that they have in their home countries. So to the extent that, we or any of us in the audience are able to do that, that has to, again, be sort of the primary step.
Thank you, Raj. Would you like to add to that, Kathy?
Thank you. Yeah, I think we could actually probably do a better job celebrating the successes we've had with the development of animal legal education in the United States so that people can learn from that. And so it actually helps us further entrench here. We probably also have to do a better job discussing the challenges, right, that we have to continuing to grow, because we've kind of plateaued and we have some retrenchment of animal legal education in the US. So I think we can look to learn more about those lessons, what has worked well, what has not worked well. Because I agree with Raj, I think some of the same challenges that we have faced in the past and continue to face, people are facing abroad. So in addition to the concept that it's a niche course, it doesn't matter, we have we have not been successful yet explaining to our colleagues who teach in law schools that animal law courses, classes, cases, issues are already a part of their disciplines, and they're ignoring it. They're actually not doing their jobs fully because they're not addressing important legal questions that involve animals in con law, admin, property, torts, all over the place, certainly environmental law, right? We have people who are doing that, but not enough. And so we have to help people just in the same way Raj was saying that it's not just a US problem, right? So we can't atomize US, so we can't be thinking that what works in the US works everywhere, certainly. But we also have to recognize the intersections between, right, these issues across the globe. And the same thing within a jurisdiction. It's not just animal law class should be taught and you go learn about animal law and you're done. It's actually everywhere, right, in our legal conversations. And so we need to actually explicitly address that. And so I think that's one way that we can begin to help some of our colleagues abroad. And there are a lot of other ways that we can begin to think how to support them. But just raising the question, right, is a really helpful thing. So we can all be thinking in our own ways. What can we do? Can we begin to think about the international or the foreign law aspects of the work that we're already doing? Are there connections we can make? Are there ways we can reach out? Are there people who need help? They're desperate, right? And they don't have, we think we don't have enough resources in the US to do this work. Just imagine people in other places, right? It's just that much harder for them. And again, not just to teach animal law, to teach law or to practice law or to exist, right? So we have an awful lot of work to do to sort of recognize those challenges and in whatever ways we can begin to think how we can help.
Thank you. Let's shift to the future and some opportunities before we get to the Q&A. And at the top, you all shared with us your path here and what inspired you. Can you give me an idea of what you think the future profile of an animal advocate or animal educator looks like? Claire, why don't you start?
Yeah. I mean, I start to feel like a broken record sometimes because honestly, I think we need to see this much more politically. And I think that we need to start thinking about it from just a general understanding that what we have right now it's rooted in exploitation. It's rooted in the commodification of bodies in our natural world. And so I think that that's really where we need to be. And again, I think that like the good news and something to celebrate is that this generation is seeing that. So I think that the profile of the aspiring or the future law student who's interested in animal law, certainly interested in non-human animals and protecting them, but equally interested in the protection of human beings and the environment. From an anti-capitalist standpoint, I think that really is infrastructurally where we need to be right now. Yeah, I think that's all.
Thank you. Kathy, why don't we just go around?
In some respects, I think the profile is the same as I would have said a few years ago. And in some ways, I think it's different. So I tend to say that students need to, and advocates need to, and educators need to be persistent. They need to be patient because this work takes a long time, and they need to be passionate, and they need to be able to feel free to explore those passions and pursue those passions. I think resilience has become even more important in the face of all the things that we're talking about. And I think one of the things that I see with some of the younger people in the movement, which I really appreciate, is they're asking for what they need. And so as long as people are open to hearing what, to responding to that appropriately. So I would just say, it always takes courage to be an activist. It always takes courage to open a new conversation. And I think that's more true right now, but I appreciate the courage that I hear, right, that I see displayed from folks. And so I want to sort of honor that and support it and talk to, so in a way, enlarging the question, not just what do they need to do, but what do we need to do, right, to support them. And so we need to listen to them and support them on these journeys.
I think Gen Z is, the most historically diverse generation here in the United States, and the animal law, the animal protection community needs to be, exceptionally responsive to that. What sort of pathways do we see for these advocates who care about animal law issues, but don't necessarily see the same pathways that we, those of us in this room, if you went to a law school or graduated from a law school, that you saw for yourself. And so again, how do we create new pathways that sort of empower them, that recognize where they're coming from? To what extent have we read their stories? Do we understand their narratives so that when they come here, they feel heard, they feel respected, that they feel like we understand, and honor who they are? And speaking of, just number of pathways, the JD, to practice animal law, to engage in animal law issues, you've almost certainly had to have gotten a JD in the past. And, you know, just one of the conversations that we've been having at CALS is, you know, to what extent should a JD be sort of be serving this gatekeeping function? And so, you know, with the advent of our MSL program, this degree for non-lawyers, it just opens up the number of pathways to addressing animal law issues, to engaging with animal law issues, and to empowering people who don't necessarily want to or need to engage in the practice, sort of legal practice of animal law, but who need the animal law education to be able to effectuate the type of change that they want to see. So that pathway, and some of you who were here yesterday heard about the creation of our animal law SJD program, and really sort of solidifying that animal law has arrived, that you can do sort of formally what I have been trying to do through my doctorate in English, to try to manufacture sort of an animal law, you know, degree, doctorate degree, that you can do that here now. And, you know, these times are changing, pathways are opening, but, you know, I think it's incumbent upon all of us in our own ways to be opening up those pathways, creating new ones, because this generation is looking to enter this room, and we have to sort of create that space for them.
Great. I think we have time for one more question and then we'll open it up. So to tie it all up, what can animal law educators, students, and young advocates do right now to make a difference for animals?
That's such a complicated question. I mean, because I think, again, I think we all feel this sense of urgency to do something right now, but I think that this is a long journey that we're on. And I think there's frankly very little that we can do right in this moment. I think, you know, I'll be perfectly honest, I get tired of people saying, well, go vegan. It's not working out, guys. We're losing that battle. We're outsourcing these practices to other countries. Global meat consumption is on the rise. We're eating far more meat now than we were in previous generations, and that is hugely concerning. So I think if we're simply making it about personal choice, that is a problem. This is a systemic issue, and we need to be addressing it as such. So I mean, I think from my standpoint, what people can be doing is they can be getting more politically involved. Again, I mean, I'm a big advocate for reducing the voting age to 16. Young people they're the ones inheriting all of these problems. They're very keenly aware of what they're up against. I think that they should be much more involved. We should be giving them a lot more spaces to be involved in our political system and to revolutionize it, frankly. Short of that, I mean, direct action, certainly something that people can be doing. Volunteering, you know, I feel, but again, I feel like those are the kinds of things that we say in an effort to placate, in an effort to make it feel like we are doing something about the problem. But later on today, my very good friend Gwen will be speaking about the sanctuary that she runs, and I think that is certainly one thing that we can be doing in order to just invigorate ourselves, give ourselves hope, is to volunteer at farmed animal sanctuaries in particular, and to be very supportive of those efforts.
Yeah, I think when I talk to folks, sometimes it's like, do whatever it is that you can do, right? Whatever space you're in, if you can take one step forward, that's a good step. Every step in a good direction is a good step. And I do think we sometimes tend to say like these big things, like you're a failure if you haven't changed, if you haven't made people vegan, or if, you know. And so I do think just recognizing the space you're in, the capacity that you have, and work with that, and whatever that is. And there's so many linkages, right, to the law. So at GW, we have a collaboration now with the high school in DC, where we're trying to help students and not just learn about animal law, but learn about what they want to learn about, and also create a pipeline for them to college, if that's what they want to do, and then to law school, if that's what they want to do. And so trying to listen, right? Again, we need to be listening to help people do the things that we're asking them to do and creating those pathways. But there are so many different ways to conceptualize our work. So the SJD and the MSL, right? These are different ways to think about it, which is great. So we have a new animal law and science project at GW. And so trying to talk to scientists and help them, like, what is it in their space they want to be doing? I think one of the most fundamental things is that most people in the world already have a critique. Right? Like this thing stinks, right? Why is this happening? And so if we can just tell people, go ahead and try and fix that. Talk to people who care about that, right? Just, you don't have to accept the things you think are bad. You may have to deal with them, but let's work to try and find some solutions together.
And maybe I'll offer, a simple sort of response. Ask folks, what is it that you need, and what aren't we doing to meet that? And I think that's probably one of the most powerful ways that you can reach new audiences. You can reach, new advocates and those who may not understand or may not sort of see the same sort of pathways to doing this kind of work, or, because I think all of us up here and many, if not all of you out there, are sort of eager for people to come to you to ask, how can you help me? And I'm actually more scared to like go out to you and to say, for students right now, it's like, I want to ask, how can I help you? But I don't want to necessarily presume that you want or need my help. So, and I think that's, some anxiety that a lot of us here have, but don't hesitate to ask, because I want to know what I'm not doing. And so again, I think as much as we can empower you to ask that question, please do.
Wonderful. Thank you all for your perspectives. We really appreciate it. We have about 15 minutes for Q&A. So if anyone has any questions, please line up behind these two mics here. And then for the virtual folks, you can submit your questions via the Q&A icon at the bottom of your screen. All right, why don't we start right here with this mic? Hi.
Hi, my name is Lindsay. I'm a law student at Chapman University. My question's for Claire. With school-age animal advocates, these students are often at odds with their own parents' beliefs. To what extent have parents given their feedback about your organization and been involved either as adversaries or maybe as enthusiastic fellow advocates?
Yeah, that's such a great question. I mean, we have some parents who are involved, but I would say by and large, they're not. I think that's largely though, because we work with a demographic of people who are trying to establish some independence and some autonomy and would rather that their parents not be as heavily involved. I would say, I don't know necessarily, I don't know that I could say it's like 50-50 or 40-60 or anything like that, but we have a number of ravens whose families are involved with animal rights activism or are vegan. And that's sort of how they come to us, is that they're looking for a supportive community that they're maybe not finding at school or within their other social networks. But we also certainly have a lot of ravens who are not getting that support at home. And as a result are oftentimes having to continue to participate in systems that they are diametrically opposed to, and that's really hard for them. So we try to be particularly supportive of those ravens, with the understanding that at some point they will be completely independent and be able to make their own decisions.
Thank you. Why don't we go over to this mic here on my right?
Hello, sorry. My name is Altamash Said. I am an LLM in animal law student at Lewis and Clark. And I just wanted to start by thanking the panel for the wonderful conversation. And Claire, while I say these things, my heart does pound. And Kathy, when you said that it takes a lot of courage to be an activist, that is 100% true. And but my first comment is from a good place. So I'm sure people have realized in the last 2 days, there has been an echo coming from the mics, and there are people who cannot understand. It's not on purpose, I know, but there are students who have disabilities who will not be able to hear us. And that problem exists just because it's by design, but you're not doing that by a fault. And I think that's the beauty of animal law, because it makes me think about all of these things, of the problems that people can face and how we can open it up for other people. And Dr. Raj, finally, I mean, you're the reason I'm standing in this room, so I just cannot thank you enough. But the question that I have, and the conversation that we have had so many times in our class, about the originating point where the true education between a person and an animal starts. It's not actually in the classrooms, it's outside. And the first time that you see an animal and the animal is seeing you and you're seeing them, and you don't know what's happening, he doesn't know. And my question in relation to that is that we have so many bans in the US laws, for example, food bans, water bans, things like these, which basically create this kind of a barrier when a kid who is like 4-year-old, someone like me who was 4 and he sees a cat and he is not like allowed to feed that cat, and if he does, he puts his parents or somebody in like some kind of a legal liability. That basically creates a critique in the minds of these people that Kathy, you mentioned, that when these people grow up, especially parents, or even if there's a dog bite or something like these issues coming up. And then when the child grows up, he grows up with the idea that he cannot either support these cats or any animal, or if he's part of like a bad incident, he will take that to them through his heart. So I just wanted to question this idea that originating point of humane education or animal-human connection is not actually in the law school. It's the first time you see an animal, and that has been actually tainted. And how can we like change that, or does this make sense? I just keep thinking about these things. Thank you.
Can I start, Rue? So it was really, I appreciate that you recognize the echo, and so thank you for that. And we are having a little difficulty, but I think to the extent that I heard a lot of what you said, one of the things that I do in some of my classes, because you're right about the education being about our experience with animals outside of the classroom. So one of the exercises I ask students to engage in sometimes at the first day of class is, tell me about your last interaction with an animal. And so people think about, oh, well, before I left school, I, pet my dog. And I'm like, is there anything more recent? And anything more recent? And I keep pushing. And so students often don't even recognize, well, I saw a bird or I saw a squirrel. They literally sort of, it's not in our consciousness. And then bring it into the present. Are you having any interactions with animals right now? Right. So maybe what we're wearing, or, the products on our bodies and things like that. So making visible, right, those connections create all kinds of learning opportunities. And I think you're right, bridging, right, the outside and the inside, and then bringing also the thing that we're also trying to do is bring that inside academic conceptualization after people have done all this work we're trying to help them do back outside, right? Make it meaningful for the communities, right? Being engaged with and responsive to the conversations in those communities. So I don't know if that's 100% responsive to your comments and question.
It's good. It's good. Thank you. And I advocate for people with disabilities. So I just had to say that. Sorry for that.
That's right.
Thank you.
Thank you. Why don't we take a virtual question here? Go ahead.
Good morning. What would you say to a 1L law student is the single biggest challenge to overcome in animal law?
I mean, I'll say really quickly, it's often a crisis of confidence. People don't feel like they belong, right? They don't feel like, and this is all law students, right? And then so it's hard enough to be a law student, and then it's hard to do something that's unusual in law school. So those two things are really challenging. So I think just confidence. And so my response to how to handle that would be all the things that Raj and Claire have said, right? Find community, find people to support you. It doesn't even have to be in the law school, but you will find those people. So hang on until you can develop that confidence.
My answer to that would be, I think when I was a 1L and learning about these issues, it seemed like the law was never going to change, that the situation would never get better. And to the extent that you can find a mentor, that you have someone out there who has been in the field for a long time and has sort of a longer view of, yes, there have been many setbacks, but there have also been many gains. And one of the heartening things for me, having been in the field for, almost a decade now, is that I can see it. And it's something that I wish someone had imparted to me, day one. It'll take you a long time to really see it, but you will see it, not just from reading the cases, but actually working on these cases and, contributing to the discourse. And so, just know that there is significant change that's happened, and you will add to it.
Thank you.
It's a really short mic.
Hi.
Can I take it? Yeah, hi. My name is Mo. I'm an animal law LLM at Lewis and Clark, and I'm from Nigeria. And I intend that after the program, I will be back in Nigeria to kind of establish, an animal law program in my field. Now, I do have a challenge. When I was doing my master's, last year in the university in Nigeria. My dissertation was on global animal law. It was really hard. The faculty, they had a very close mind towards it. And what I was able to do was to convince one professor who was then willing to supervise. Now, I'm asking this question as someone who is thinking of going back to face that kind of faculty. It's really hard, but I'm willing to go. I feel like if I can change one person's mind, then next time I'll have 2 people and 3 and it will go on. But also with focus on the students. What do you think would be the best approach to build a very, very lively, interesting, and confident student chapter that might have a rippled effect on the faculty in the long run?
So I don't think there's one right path, I will say that, but I think if students sometimes can connect outside, if they're having struggles making themselves heard within the university, finding support outside and then bringing that back in. So what we have found sometimes, especially students trying to develop new organizations or courses in the United States, outside the United States, if they bring someone in who says, we do this is real, this is serious, and then look at what we've accomplished. Like there are serious laws, right? We have a law before the United States Supreme Court. This matters, this is important. Sometimes it takes other voices to support the student voices trying to make that change.
Yeah, and I'll add to that. I think that's a great answer. Bringing in, experts, people who have taught, who can, discuss with the administration that this is a significant area of study, and your country participates in all of these treaties that are all sort of animal treaties, even though they might overlap with environmental law treaties. But you have these on the books, and there's significant sort of material there, substantive material there to teach. And to the extent that you're going to have a specialized degree in animal law, like that means something. That again, an animal law program has affirmed that this is a substantive area of study, that you can specialize in this, that there is a market for this, and that there is a significant sort of contribution to the legal discourse. And that's empowering. And hopefully, the administrators at your home institution will see that and see that as an important sort of addition to, again, their home institution, that they need to have this.
And I'll say really quickly, at GW, we're just creating the Council on Animal Legal Education, in part to answer this kind of question, right? To create a body that sort of gives status and support to people trying to do this work all across the globe.
Thank you. We have time for one more question. So if you would like to go ahead, and we have 2 minutes, so go.
Okay, hi, I'm Samantha. I'm a 4th-year student at the Brooklyn Law School. This question might be best answered by Claire, but I'd be happy to hear from any of you. I'm thinking about really young children. What modalities and methodologies do we have to reach them to promote empathy for non-human animals and human animals before the current view of animals in our system is normalized in their psyche?
Yeah, oh, that's such a good question. And I wish I had I wish humane education was just institutionalized. I think that that's what we need to be working towards. There are 13 states with quote unquote humane education laws, but they're so poorly enforced. And so I think that it's also just really challenging. When I was working as a humane educator and was going into schools, it's very challenging for teachers to find the time to work anything into their curriculum. And frankly, they're increasingly losing their ability to choose what they're going to supplement the current curriculum with, what's important to the students and what's important to them. And so I think that there's a lot of really important work that can be done to further humane education, to make it a standard part of the American curriculum, because I think it is also, when I was working in schools, we predominantly catered to 4th through 6th graders. I mean, I had so many moments when I was in schools where we would all like be in tears, and the kids would just be so engaged. They have so much natural empathy, and I think in a lot of ways we really steal that from them. So I think if we can institutionalize humane education, working on policy to institutionalize humane education, I think that would be a really important step in the right direction.
And can I add really, really quickly, I know we're out of time, but we need to stop teaching students and children how to see animals that way. We actually teach them to do that, right? Vivisection in classrooms, all kinds of stuff. So in adding, we need to foster the empathy they already have with animals and stop teaching them that animals are separate. So if we can find those places in the curriculum to take out, that's also a little bit easier than adding a whole new curriculum, at least politically.
Thank you for the
Thank
great
you.
question. And thank all of you up here. It was wonderful today.